Good morning.
Hello.
All right. So good thinking 30. I feel like there's some celebration there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, 30 newsletters is a lot, huh? Feels like a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good. Yeah. Stuck
A lot
with
of
it, you know? Here we are.
people are into it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm in
Ama-
Chicago, so very different background. I also have an evil pinky ring, so that will make an appearance at some point. So yeah, let's do it.
All
I gotta
right.
get to the camp store. I gotta go. I'm going to, you know, do what I said and check out toy stores.
Right. Go check out Bluey.
Yes.
I love it. Cool. All right, a bunch of like pretty big topics that may need to be their own kind of episode that I think are something that we want to dig into. I'll give you an overview and then we can kind of dig in. I think kind of sober on a journey. I think that's something that, we've experienced personally in like different iterations, and it's definitely out there and happening. And I think just like your insight as far as really like the pendulum swing and really getting kind of into that sweet spot. But I think talking a little bit more about that and where we see kind of the future of that going would be fascinating.
Hmm.
um I think what we'll dig into pretty deeply, and I think we just can't nod, is the Olympics.
Right.
I mean, you're such a fan. Are your parents there?
They are there. I'm
So
getting
like,
I'm getting daily updates from the Lego Batamush. So if anyone wants to know about that, I have a lot of insight.
yeah. So I feel like that's where, because for me, it's like I haven't watched much of the Olympics. And what's really inspiring for me are the cultural moments. And I think there's plenty of them. And it's
Hmm.
really amazing and empowering. And we need it at this time for sure. So would love to dig more into that. But then I also think Ulta and, kind of Alpha and what they want, and really doing a bit of a deep dive within that, because it's happening. There's personal knowledge there. Again, the list that you sent as far as my daughter Sailor was like spot on. And I think there's opportunity to really dig into that a bit more. And I think people are interested in it. And then we can't not talk about Southwest. Um, Such an
Yep.
ownable, such an understandable, such a clear brand. And they just seem to be taking that away for some super unknown reason.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a like. Well, we can talk about it a little bit more when we get to Southwest, but I think I would also tie that to what's happening with Nike, which I'm sure I'll talk about in the next newsletter, and everyone talking about like what's gone wrong there.
Yeah.
But I would tie that back to the same. I would use Nike for Southwest as a like Southwest should be looking and thinking this is a warning. This is a warning for us. So
Yes.
okay.
Yeah. So you want to dig into that now?
Yeah. So I mean, so what's interesting to me about Southwest, right, is they have such an ownable brand. They've invested so much time into being different, right? Differentiating themselves to like, an awkward degree at
Yeah.
times. It's not for
They're
everyone.
embracing it.
Like it's not I mean, quite honestly, the first time I flew Southwest, I was like, this is absolute chaos. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know. But, there's a group of people that this really works for and it
Totally.
really resonates with them. And I think that if you're going to take away something as ownable to your brand as the like free seating that no one else has, and it seems like the reason that they're doing it is that they want to add business class, right? Because that's obviously what floats like every single other airline. So they're thinking to themselves, like, yes, we need these like more premium seats, but just come up with a way to do it in a differentiated way that feels authentic to you guys. Like to just go and strip back everything that makes you unownable is so crazy. And the parallel that I'm making with Nike is that so Nike a while ago, we've talked about this a bunch, like personally, you and I, but I don't know if we've ever talked about it on the podcast. So basically, Nike's having a terrible time, like stocks in the toilet.
Right.
And one of the things they did right around COVID was that they decided to focus on their direct to consumer model. And they basically like took away like all of their investment into wholesale, right?
From wholesale.
And
Yeah.
yeah, they took like they moved away from wholesale. They focused on their own doors. They mostly focused on their online. And in order to drive traffic for that, they had to do tons and tons and tons of performance marketing, which actually has been an enormous amount of money for them and hasn't been successful. Shocker of shocks. And in doing so, they stripped all these teams. They took away all the categories that they had that were, again, ownable.
Renamed them.
And someone was talking about, like, hey, like when I go and shop for Nike, like I go straight to the basketball section. I look at the basketball shoes because I like the basketball shoes, and then I go buy something more practical. And that is like everything that was ownable about Nike, the big commercials, like that weren't about like just sell, 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 worked for them. And they, you know, of course, our friends McKinsey were involved in this like no category thing. And so much of it is it's a not understanding why people like you
Yeah.
and what makes you ownable. And they took away basically everything that made Nike ownable, all the things that made the brand. And sure, they're not measurable. Like it's harder to measure. Like, and I bet that's the same thing happening with Southwest is they're like,
Mm.
hey, we can't measure that this is working. So we're going to just do the other thing that everyone else can tell you is working. And I'm confident that that is not the way to go.
Totally, totally. But I think the ROI and being like, well, if you can't measure it, and I think somebody like a McKinsey, they come in and like that's what they're basing it off of is all of that. And I would argue that, you know, Nike was a company that was brand first.
Yeah.
That was 100% who they were and what they did. And that's why everybody looked to them because they were about brand. And that was the most important thing. And that's what they were leading with. And since their old CEO left, like that, it's been performance marketing and it's been direct to consumer and it's been all of these like analytical leading forces versus like, what is the brand about and how are we inspiring people and how are we creating athletes out of everybody and all of that. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's that. And then I think it's really like, to your point, coming in from the analysis standpoint versus like, what's really the consumer journey? Like, what are people really coming in and really understanding that? It's just doing it from a desk in an office versus really understanding how somebody's
Yeah.
shopping and wants to experience the brand. It's tragic. It's really
Yeah.
tragic. And, you know, we love
So
it.
if you're ever wondering about whether or not brand is worth it, I would just go look at Nike stock and I would just sit there for a minute and think about things. And then I would, you know, take a hard look at what you want to do. Because I think it's telling for a lot of brands. And I think there is this like sense of like when you're in a place of fear to like really go into like something that can be measured and something like,
Yeah.
I get that. Like, and I think there's probably like a balance there again, but like, yeah, I think we see the writing on the wall. And they're bringing back categories, they're bringing back brand. They're basically having to do an about face. But meanwhile, they've pissed off all of the wholesalers. And
Yeah.
who got the wholesale doors? On Hoka.
Yeah.
They're all doing really well, and they're prioritizing both channels. Like they're prioritizing their own doors and wholesale, just like Nike did. And they're looking at Nike. On is basically taking Nike's old playbook and like
They're killing it.
recreating it in their own way. And like, I feel like Nike's probably really kicking themselves
Yeah,
in the
they're
butt.
killing it. Yeah, they're killing it. It can be a yes and I think when you look at brand, you need to look at things that are an ROI because there absolutely are things that are very measurable out there. But you also need to look at the things that are really clearly make an impact, like brand, that aren't always measurable from the other side of the desk.
Yeah. So, boo on not having your own differentiation and boo on not focusing on your brand. That's the summation.
All right, Olympics. I mean, again, I haven't watched a ton of it, but the cultural moments, and those are always the things like the tier moments that really stand out to me and that are so fucking impactful. From the opening ceremonies, I just watched the Celine documentary. She's such a badass. And like just watching her opening ceremony, like do that, just amazing. And I think there's just been so many moments having an all black podium. I can't believe that's the first time we've ever had that. It's insane, but also beautiful. Snoop Dogg, just all of the things kind of that you outlined. And I'd love to dig in more, but also, why is it so prevalent right now? Is it just like our access to social? Is it just like we really need it as, a society right now? But it just feels like it's really there in really the right ways. And brands seem to be getting it and kind of playing in the right way. Celebrities seem to be getting it and owning it and sharing like their personal, more vulnerable story to help support people in mental health and whatever that may be, as well as, accepting the podium. Like it just seems to be a really, really interesting time culturally with what's happening.
I would argue that I think brands could be I think brands will show up more in LA than they have shown up here. So I think the appetite, like the Japanese Olympics was delayed by a year. Everybody was going through COVID. They couldn't really have the spectators. They couldn't have like so much going on. And I think quite honestly, like the athletes had been through so much being delayed and all of this stuff
Yeah.
that I think they weren't also as like, like as jazzed about like it as they have been about. And they really like the athletes are, I think, the winners in terms of content creation. Like there's so many of them. They're doing such a wonderful job. And I think that what to me, like what brands should take away is that the number of sports that have risen to the top this year, like the diversity of the sports and the
Mhm.
diversity of like the types of people who are getting attention, like you would never have had a celebrity female rugby player. Never. That would
Mhm.
never have happened before. She doesn't fit the like little neat model. Like it was always the gymnasts because they're always like so
Totally.
petite and little and it makes sense. And they do such a cool sport that makes it so like it's so beautiful, right? Like so it's easy to put on TV. Whereas I think what's really showing up is that all these athletes are really coming out. And I do think like to me, I think next time in LA, like brands leaning into the more cultural opportunities
Yeah.
versus just like there was some cool pop-ups, like, I didn't put a whole list on there, but like Wingstop did like, pretty traditional stuff like basketball, like, you know, selling wings, like, like pretty normal things.
Yeah.
But I do think like Pampers tried to do it this year by creating
Right.
um
It was amazing.
yeah, but like that could be even bigger. Like that kind of stuff I think could be even bigger. I could see a mental health thing happening at the next
Sure.
Olympics from a brand that leans into that. And obviously, it being LA and America, I think that brands will do that. But I would suggest they start planning it now.
Yeah, you have to start planning now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Real estate is only so much. And I do think it'll be interesting strategically thinking about how so Paris is much smaller than LA. And so, Paris really hubbed in. And I don't think that LA is planning to hub in the same way.
Hmm.
So it'll be really interesting to see like how brands show up and I think becoming a destination at like some of these more like spread out locations will be really interesting for brands.
Hmm.
Like I think there's opportunity to get lost, but I think there's also opportunity to really be seen, you know,
Yeah,
so there's
for
more
sure.
space.
For sure. I think it's going to be, yeah, amazing. And I think brands will really get on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so, so good. All right. Should we talk a little bit more? Anything else you want to share on the Olympics?
No, I mean, I'm loving it. It's
Yeah.
fun. Like, I'm glad that other people are excited about it. I think
Yeah.
it'll only be bigger next.
100%. It's such a moment and such an opportunity for so many reasons. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
the diversity, I think the brands, I think all that. So excited and have it in my backyard. Sober on a journey. What like we've seen and we've worked on like, non-alcoholic brands, amazing alcoholic brands, like and everything kind of in between. And I think, I haven't been drinking for the last couple of weeks. Like it's like this ebb and flow, I think, that we're seeing and that I'm certainly experiencing. Where do we think it's gonna land?
I don't think it's going to land anywhere. I mean, I think the point I was trying to make, and I think that Matt Klein makes so well, is that when you look at something like, I think there's an inclination when people see trends like the sober, like I would say it's not really sobriety so much as like uh, more conscious
Yeah.
drinking and like a less of. But obviously, some people on the sober journey. But I think like when people see that, they're like, oh, alcohol's dead. Like, like there's not, everyone's not drinking. And I think when you see such a strong trend, you can look to kind of the other side and see what there is. And I think with ayahuasca journeys and all of that kind of like stuff coming out, I think like what that's showing is just like an extreme wellness. Like people are trying to get well,
Yeah.
like in a different way, and they're trying lots of different things. And I think like similar with like I'm sure there's Ozempic, and then there's, like the meat influencers from this week. Like, like it's, and those aren't even necessarily the two right ends of that spectrum. But I think like if you're a brand and you're like, the sober thing doesn't fit my brand, you can look to the other end of the pendulum, figure out what the other end of the pendulum is, and then make the link between them. And that's the insight. Like, so you're like, okay, like it's an extreme wellness trend. Like, is there a way for our brand to fit on that? Maybe there isn't. It's not about shoehorning yourself in, but I think it's just about there's more opportunity there than you might realize.
Yeah, I think it's also I think that's a good point. I think it's also a really good insight. Like when we talk about it's not even demographics, but really understanding who your audience is, like looking at this lens, like where are they on that spectrum, whether or not you're an alcoholic brand. It has nothing to do with that. You don't have to be an alcoholic brand to know that. But I think it's interesting because it tells you a bit about their lifestyle of where they are in this particular journey.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Ulta wants alpha. I mean, right now, my 10-year-old's on we're on the Sephora kick. Like if we see an Ulta, we're definitely in it. Ulta's in Target, we're in. But you think they're coming after it?
Well, I think they're trying to, and it's funny. Like I was thinking back, and like obviously, like thinking back, and I was like, Sephora was also a thing when I was like that
Yeah.
age too. Like the amount of bath beads that I would buy at Sephora, like what was I doing with all these bath beads? Anyway,
Oh,
I don't even think we had a bath, which was so funny about it. But like it's not a new trend. I think like what I'm seeing with Ulta is that like Sephora used to have kind of a private label, and I feel like they really haven't leaned into that. They do have it, but I don't feel like it's
yeah,
like that's not what people are going to get at
for
Sephora
sure.
at the moment. And I think Ulta's coming in and saying like, hey, we can really compete on price. Like, because if you're going to Sephora and the kids are buying like, bubble like face wash, like, there's, and Elf is competing on price, and they're definitely like a
Hmm.
popular brand. And
Yeah,
I think that just the cleanup that they're doing and just trying to make themselves a little bit more relevant. Like, I don't feel like the brand is like, wow, like that's amazing, but it is night and day to what it was. Like, it
yeah.
does feel fresher, and the packaging feels cooler.
And they have a lot of
And
shelf space typically at places.
yeah,
Target.
they do. Yeah, so it makes sense. I mean, Target is really good at doing the private label brand. They just don't put Target on it. You know, like they got plenty of private labels in there, but they're not like
Right.
putting their brand all over it. It's just a
Right.
different
Which
strategy.
is a smart. It's like the Madewell, it's like all of those brands that used to be in Madewell, like Mickey's vision was that they're all different brands, but they're still private label. They're just named different and you think that they're
Right.
cool, which is
And I
exactly.
think that that is what, to me, like private label, like I think that there's a lot happening with private label now, especially with supermarkets. And I think if they could lean into more of that strategy, I think they'd be more successful. I would never take a Whole Foods 365 anything to somebody's house for a party, like ever. Like I would be ashamed.
Yeah.
So, like, that is what that's how I kind of think
Right.
about those private labels is like, would I be happy giving this to like my friend? Like, if it's like, if you were like, hey, like, coming over for a dinner party and like maybe like the chips, but not like,
You wouldn't bring the chips.
anything.
But Foxtrot, rest in peace.
Yes. Well, no,
You
they're back. I mean, it's
right.
controversial that it's back, but anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
they did private label really, really well.
So there's a huge opportunity within to do it, but it's thinking about it in a different way. Like I think that's the thing, right? Is like you look at the 365, you look at the all right, well, we're just gonna, take the whatever organic and we're gonna do it in a more interesting way that really is like its own brand. I think the difference is they're really thinking about it within its own brand, even though it's under private label. I think that's what Target does. I think that's what Madewell does. Certainly that's what Foxtrot did.
Right. And so I think Ulta could have gone that direction. Certainly not the easier direction to go.
Right.
And if they really need to about face, like their business is not doing well because they're competing with Sephora, like that definitely takes a stronger team, more work. But to me, like I could see easily a private label done right, like being the brand that people want if it's done right. And I think currently there are no private labels that really hold up to that. I think Trader Joe's is the closest I can think of. Like, people love Trader Joe's.
Yeah, I mean, I still wouldn't bring a bottle of wine of Trader Joe's over to somebody's house.
No, not their wine. But like,
But
if you were to bring their dip, people wouldn't be unhappy about it.
okay, okay. So dip, yes, wine, no.
At a certain, it depends on
Casualness depends on where I go.
yeah, depends on where.
Right.
It's mainly got to do with the dip is better tasting than most other private label dips.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And their
So
wine's not bad either. But yeah, fair enough. Okay. But I think there's an opportunity to really get on the private bandwagon, like
doing it right.
Yeah, not just certainly for Ulta, but I think in general. Like I think the ones that we've identified and we've seen done right. Like I'm even thinking about Erewhon. Of course, like they've got a ton, right? They're using the Amazon model to like go after, okay, this is the best of the best of what Symbiotica does. Now we're going to do it. We'll have Symbiotica produce it for us, but it'll be private label Erewhon. It'll be $5 cheaper. But they're not. It's just a pretty basic Erewhon because they have the clout of the brand.
Right. Yeah.
But there's for sure opportunity there.
Yeah.
I
don't know if Ulta has the clout is the problem.
Right. But then they could do it like the Target model where you're building a brand that's a private label brand.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Lots of opportunity out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Totally.
All right. Anything else we want to hit on, or should we get you to go to camp and see the Bluey experience with Harry?
Yeah, I'm gonna go do that, and then doing a cocktail tasting tonight. Like doing it up. No, I'm not on the sober train today. Not today. Some days.
All right.
Ciao.
Enjoy Chicago. We'll look to hear all the things.
All right. Sounds good. Bye.
All right. Bye.